Unbroken sheets of rain fell, each drop striking the forest floor with a sound akin to foreign language whispers. As Emily stumbled over roots concealed beneath layers of wet leaves, her hair stuck to her face, soaked through, strands plastered to her cheeks. Daniel trudged next to her, his jaw clenched, the freezing night air a cloud of mist with every breath. The mud clung stubbornly to their boots, tugging at their feet as if the ground itself wished to keep them there. Every path they took seemed to spiral back into the same oppressive wall of trees, and the trail markers they had been following earlier in the day had vanished, engulfed by the deepening shadows. The beam of the flashlight shrank to a thin cone of pale light that hardly touched the ground in front of them as it sputtered in Emily's shaking hands. A faint but intentional sound, the crunch of damp leaves beneath a heavy step, came from somewhere in the darkness, far behind them. Daniel came to a sudden halt, looking around the dark. Although the way his voice cracked revealed the doubt in his own words, he said, "It's just the wind." They went more quickly now, their hearts beating in time with the drumming of the rain. With the branches above bending strangely and their sharp silhouettes twisting against lightning strikes, the forest appeared to be alive. Emily fought the sudden, illogical thought that the wind smelled like old blood, but it was actually a faint, musty, metallic scent, almost like rust. Then the dark, angular looming shape appeared out of the trees. As they got closer, details started to emerge, but initially it appeared to be just another tangled mass of branches. In the clearing stood a house, or the remnant of a house. Its boards were distorted and swollen from years of neglect, and its walls slumped inward as if they were giving way under an unseen weight. Thick ropes of ivy strangled the roof, and black streaks of rot crawled up from the foundation. Every time lightning tore across the sky, the shards of broken windows glinted with a cruel sharpness, and the windows gaped like open mouths. Although it creaked as though it were breathing, the front door hung crookedly, half open, and swayed gently with the wind. Daniel paused, looking over the edge of the trees. It seemed as though the sound of actual footsteps had ceased. But now there was an unnatural, heavier silence, as if the forest itself had chosen to hold its breath. Emily's lips were white with cold, and he glanced back at her. Her eyes darted anxiously toward the black maw of the doorway as she shivered violently. Even though they were only thinking about shelter, the air felt heavier around the house, as though approaching it would cross an invisible boundary. As they ascended the sagging steps, the porch creaked under their combined weight. Rainwater pattered onto the boards like a heartbeat as it dripped steadily and slowly from the roof's edges. It smelled stronger here, mildew, damp wood, and something slightly sweet and rotten. The wood splintered beneath Daniel's fingers as he reached out and touched the door. Without any opposition, it swung open wider, exposing a hallway that was completely dark. Something moved deep in the forest behind them, not very loudly, but enough to make Emily gasp. It didn't get any closer. It just waited, observing, and entering the house felt safer than going back, for reasons neither of them could explain. With a muffled thud, the door closed behind Emily and Daniel as soon as they entered, enclosing them in a darkness so dense it seemed alive. The air was heavy, damp and cold, with a subtle odor of decay. Emily's flashlight beam pierced the darkness to reveal walls covered in peeling wallpaper that curled at the edges like paper that had been scorched. As if it resented their presence, the floor beneath their boots popped and moaned. Every time they moved, the dust floated in the air, seeming to cling to their throats with every breath. The smallest sound reverberated somewhere deeper in the house, a gentle, erratic tapping that sounded like fingernails on wood. Daniel urged her to remain near him in a whisper, but the tapping ceased as soon as they entered the main hallway. The ensuing silence was oppressive. Their footsteps sank into a worn-out ancient rug as they made their slow way to a spacious room that was dimly lit by a gap in the boarded windows. The outlines of the faded furniture, hunched and unnatural in the shadows, were obscured by dirty white sheets. At the far end was a grand staircase with a splintered railing, and Emily swore she saw movement in the darkness just above it, something tiny and swift darting across the landing. She froze, clutching Daniel's arm, but nothing was visible when he pointed the flashlight up. The house sounded as though it was letting out a breath, the walls groaning as though they were settling, and then the sound repeated, this time from behind them. Tap, tap, tap. They spun around and discovered that the front door was now wide open, the storm outside roaring louder than ever, but the hallway was deserted. Daniel's eyes glowed with relief, and he took Emily's hand and dragged her to the door. However, the door slammed violently shut halfway down the hall, reverberating like a gunshot. Every piece of furniture covered in sheets seemed to move a little, the fabric rustling in the still air. When Emily asked Daniel if he had sensed that the floor beneath them had pulsed, her voice faltered. Then they both heard it, the deliberate, slow sound of footsteps coming down the stairs. Uneven, heavy, and dragging. Halfway down, the outline of a man appeared, his body twisted at odd angles, his face swallowed in shadow, the flashlight beam trembling in Daniel's hand as it climbed the railing. His eyes were hidden, but his head jerked abruptly toward them. The tapping resumed, but this time it came from the ceiling, the walls, and the ground beneath their feet. No matter how hard Daniel pulled, the door handle remained in place despite his yanks. Emily took a step back and stared at the silent, motionless figure now standing at the bottom of the stairs. A whisper that neither of them could make out was followed by a low, damp breath that escaped from its direction. They were briefly plunged into darkness as the flashlight's lights flickered, and when it returned, the figure had vanished. Before they could say anything, cold hands grabbed their shoulders from behind and, with unnatural strength, dragged them back into the darkness. The house fell silent as the storm outside continued to rage. The door swayed in the wind and creaked open again, exposing an empty hallway. There was no sign of Daniel or Emily. The footsteps resumed somewhere in the forest. Did you like the video's theme? Be sure to subscribe and leave your sinister story to serve as the theme for the next video.